Cancer is not easy. Advances in medical science have significantly improved survival rates, offering hope through surgery, chemotherapy, radiation, and innovative therapies. How many people can say they have not only beaten this dreaded disease but flourished after that? Hi, I'm Tej. I host Chizuba Talks, the podcast series you don't want to miss listening to for the inspiring stories of grit and determination, of courage and hope. I have with me Bob Hammer, the founder and executive director of Have a Ball Foundation, on the podcast today. Why have a ball? You'll find out. He can surely say that he truly hammered cancer out and has shown everyone how. Welcome to Chizuba Talks, Bob.
Morning. Thank you for having me.
I think you are my first cancer survivor on the show. How cool is that? I'd love to hear your story and tell us how you decided to make an example of celebrating life.
Absolutely. Well, cancer is a term that I've been familiar with my entire life. My mother was diagnosed with cancer, with lung cancer, in 1967, and I was born in 1968. So my mom had cancer in her body when she was pregnant with me. Unfortunately, my mother passed on Christmas Day in 1977 when I was 9. So obviously, cancer has been a touching word in my family for a long time, having my mom pass on Christmas Day when, as a 9-year-old boy, that's something you don't forget. So fast forward to 1999, I was 30 years old, and I had a lump on my testicle. And when I was taking a shower one morning, I went to the doctor and had it removed immediately. It was removed the next day. It was diagnosed as early stages of testicular cancer. So I had a radical orchiectomy the following day in 1999. The urologist at the time felt as though they had gotten everything out and I was good to go. I didn't need any chemo or radiation. So I had a CT scan 6 months later, and I was deemed clear, which was wonderful news. So now I was just turning 31, and 10 weeks after that CT scan, I had the CT scan in May of 2000, and by November of 2000, I had some very strong chest and back pains, but I just had a clear scan, 4 months earlier, right? So I was thinking that it was my activities. I was a high school track and field coach, and I was playing softball with my friends 4 nights a week. So I was very active, right? So I chalked it up to just regular life with all of the activities that I was doing. Fast forward to November, so now that's 5 months after my clear scan. I was wrapping a gift for my daughter. We had a 1-year-old daughter, and I was wrapping a gift and I collapsed and was rushed to the hospital. And what they found was I had a tumor the size of a cantaloupe on the side of my stomach, and it was stretched with a piece of cancer going all the way up into my neck. So that was 15 weeks after a clear diagnosis. I had a tumor that size, and it had spread. It was actually enveloped throughout all of my chest cavity. Fortunately for me, it did not attach to any organs at that point, but I had a very large mass with a cucumber going up into my neck. So this was on a Friday night. I was supposed to be going to a wedding reception that evening, and instead I was at a hospital. So this was now December of 2000, and I started chemotherapy the next day. I started on a Saturday morning. I got in touch with my wife. Actually was working for a pathologist, and he got me in touch with an oncologist. I met that oncologist the next morning and started chemotherapy. Um, so I did 26 rounds of chemo, and the chemo that I took, Visplatin and C16, were very strong chemicals. And my round of chemotherapy was consisted of 5 days in a row, and then I was doing it for 6 hours each day. So that was one
Wow,
round.
that, my
That was
goodness.
one round. So I did it 5 times, and then I rested for 2 weeks, and then I did it again, and I did that 26 times over a year and a half.
What were the thoughts that went through your mind at that time while you were getting the chemotherapy done?
Um, well, with a 1 year old daughter and I was only married for 3 years at that point, and we had a 1 year old daughter. My thought was, I need to be here for my daughter,
Mhm.
and I have to prelude this by, from that moment that I was diagnosed on that Friday night, and I started the chemotherapy the next day. My wife Kim was my rock. She was there, and she was my support system, and she absolutely, without a doubt, helped me get through this and fight. Um, and I've said this as a cancer survivor and my own nonprofit for a long time. I've spoken to many people. A lot of the times when you're going through something like that, it tends to be harder on the surrounding circle of family and
Again,
friends
the
than it is the patient
caregivers.
itself. Because the patient itself knows what's going on. The people
Yeah,
that are trying to support you, they don't know what's going on, and they
true.
just they want to help, but they don't necessarily know what to do sometimes, right? It's hard. It's harder on the friends and family a lot of the time.
Yes.
Um, so I did that. I did those 26 rounds of chemo, and while I was going through the chemo, someone gave me a book, and it was written by Lance Armstrong. And at that time, he was kind of a relatively unknown American cyclist. This was before he became Lance Armstrong and the Livestrong.
Mm-hmm.
He had
Mm-hmm.
a he had a foundation out in Texas, but it wasn't very big yet. But it was based solely, for the most part, on testicular cancer patients, and it was just a good. It was a big meeting of testicular cancer guys to be able to go and see other people who had testicular cancer. So I raised enough money, and I went down to Austin, Texas in 2001. And when I was there, luckily I was introduced by a couple of people who I met there. Everybody knew that I had cancer because I was literally 2 days after my last treatment. So I had lost 30 pounds. I was 140, 150 pounds. I was stark white with bald hair and no eyelash. Everybody knew I had cancer. So a couple
Mm-hmm.
of gentlemen from Northern California, where I live, introduced themselves to me and said that they had testicular cancer, and they went through cancer with Lance. They had somebody they wanted me to meet. So the next day, I got the opportunity to meet a gentleman by the name of Dr. Craig Nichols. And Nike and Lance Armstrong hired Dr. Craig Nichols because he was one of the preeminent testicular cancer oncologists in the country, in the world. Um, so with that, I had the opportunity to sit with this gentleman and talk with him. And the great the great part of that was he listened to me. He asked me questions like, what was my blood count, my tumor markers. He was asking very specific questions about my personal diagnosis. And I was telling him the whole story, and he said at one point, he goes, I've seen this before. I've been doing this for 30 years, and I don't think you need to have that surgery. And what I was telling him was, this was on a Saturday night in April of 2001. I was
Mm-hmm.
scheduled to have the surgery 3 days later at Stanford University. And I had 5 Stanford surgeons telling me that I needed to have this surgery, or I would most likely I would die because of where my mass was. I had a small mass on my spine that was that they wanted to go in and retrieve to make sure that they had all the cancer. Well, Dr. Nichols, after hearing my story, he said, "Well, I believe that mass that they think that they want to remove, I think that it's just scar tissue, and I think that the doctor, your oncologist, did a great job, and I think that that is just scar tissue, and if you go and have that surgery, one, you'll never have children again because they literally take your sperm duct out and you won't be able to procreate anymore. Secondly, I don't care where you go to have this surgery, you're talking about having a surgery on your spine. And
Yeah,
the
it's
chances of
huge.
you walking out of there walking again are
Yeah,
minuscule. If they make one wrong move, you're 31 years old, you won't have kids, any more children, and you'll never walk. So, I rebutted with him and I said, "Well, I have 5 Stanford surgeons telling me I need surgery." And he goes, "Huh, 5 surgeons tell you need surgery? That's crazy." And in that moment, you know, when I never really had any medical issues before this moment, and you grow up learning that what the doctor says is what you need to do, and that's
correct.
kind of right. And a little light bulb in my head went up when he said, "Well, 5 surgeons tell you need surgery. That's crazy." And then I just kind of thought about it for a second, like, "Oh, wow, okay." So I ended up faxing all of my stuff to this gentleman in Oregon on a Monday, and I was supposed to have that surgery the next day at Stanford. He called me 5 hours later after reviewing my chart, which was, this thick at this point. And he said, I'm telling you that is, I think that is scar tissue. Let's hold off on the surgery, wait 6 months and see if anything happens. And if it happens, if it grows, then we have to go in. Yes. But I think I think it's scar tissue, and I think that you're okay." So with that, we had the choice of going in and getting this out or waiting and seeing what happens. My wife and I opted to listen to Dr. Craig Nichols, and we did not have the surgery. After not having that surgery, my wife and I conceived our second child a year and a half later. In
That's
2003,
fantastic.
our son Josh was born.
But
So
tell me, Bob, at that moment, when you have 5 Stanford scientists, doctors telling you that you need to get this done, and you have one doctor here who tells you that you don't need to have it done, how did you make that decision? Was it a decision that happened on the spur of the moment, or was it a decision that you took after a lot of, thinking over it?
there was a long discussion between my wife and I, and but unfortunately, we had about 10 hours to make this decision because I was scheduled to have it the next day. And in thinking through what he had to say, we decided that the thought of if it grows, then obviously we'd have to go and have this surgery. But what would be the harm?
Yeah.
What would be the harm in waiting? And maybe he's right. And we'll have another scan in 3 months now. Instead of 6 months or a year, we're going to have a scan in 3 months and find out if it's done anything.
Let's take a break to understand what Jazuba is. Everyone at some point ponders on how this beautiful life can be made more meaningful. Maybe you're a leader trying to enhance your employees' experience at your organization. Or you already work for the community and seek volunteers with state-of-the-art skills to strengthen your nonprofit. Whatever your situation, know that you can make a difference. Jazuba began with this very vision, a vision to facilitate every skill and every passion in the world in meeting a social need. Corporate volunteering has several benefits for both businesses and organizations. In parallel, Experienced and enthusiastic volunteers join NGO workers, enabling them to serve the community more effectively. Chizuba offers everyone looking to add purpose and meaning to their lives a chance to connect or volunteer virtually with non-profit organizations from over 100 countries around the world. Visit www.chizuba.net and explore opportunities to find meaning. Chizuba, your platform to do good. And now, back with our guest.
So that's the path we chose.
Sorry to break it. But did you also have, a certain dietary restriction? Did he mention something that, you need to follow this kind of diet or this exercise schedule? Is that how you did it, or was it no change in your lifestyle at all?
We had changed my lifestyle's habits of eating generally. When I was going through the chemo, I was doing obviously a lot of greens, a lot of vegetables, lots of fruit. So I was following a different diet anyway.
Mm-hmm.
I was 29 years old and a track coach. I was eating burgers and fries and no problem because I was just burning through it because
Exactly,
I didn't.
yes.
Yeah. But when I was diagnosed, we changed my diet. Yeah. So after that whole stance, and then we had our child. Shortly after my son was born, I realized that I wanted to try to help. And it was something that I learned at the Lance Armstrong Foundation, and it was during a speech that I heard. And the gentleman was speaking of the obligation of the cured. And that phrase stuck in my head. And I said to myself that evening when I heard that phrase, the obligation of the cured, I said to myself that if I were to get through this, that's going to be me. I'm going to try to do something to try to help others. That's just kind of who I have been. That's just kind of me. And so I had an idea that I wanted to try to host a golf tournament. And I wanted to raise I wanted to send a check to the Lance Armstrong Foundation for $2,500 just to say thank you for this introduction to this wonderful oncologist. So I was working at a company at the time, and the boss put me in charge of the golf tournament on a whim. He just walked over to my desk one day and said,
Oh,
"You're in charge of our company golf tournament. You're the most organized kid I know, and we're losing money in our golf tournament, so fix it." And I'm like,
so that's how golf. I thought there was a reason for golf.
yeah. So I was thrown in charge of a golf tournament that I knew nothing about, and this was a couple years earlier. So I get in touch with this golf tournament, and the first year that I got in a hold of it, we had lost $15,000. So I got a hold of the golf tournament, and I changed it from a $15,000 loss to a $3,000 loss. So we gained a little bit. And then the next year I made $12,000 on the golf tournament. And my boss walked up to me and he said, "Okay, that's good. We don't need to make that much money on a golf tournament, on a company golf tournament." So when I was thinking about how I could raise money, I thought, well, if I was doing okay with that golf tournament at that company that I worked for, maybe I'll try a golf tournament. So in 2003, after my son was born, I started creating a plan of how to do a golf tournament, and ended up launching a golf tournament a year and a half later. In 2005, I launched our golf tournament. And yes, the name of the golf tournament is the Have a Ball Golf Tournament. So I had testicular cancer, so I figured Have a Ball would be a fun name and a funny name. And it stuck.
Yeah.
And here we are. This is our 20th year. 20 years of Have a Ball, and we have now raised $4.65 million for cancer. And
Fantastic.
our foundation now benefits 20 to 24 cancer organizations each year, has nothing. Now we have nothing to do really with testicular cancer. We give money to the HERS Breast Cancer Foundation, the prostate cancer. We give money to the Ullman Fund for young adults. We give money to the, it goes on and on. So we send money to about 20 to 24 cancer organizations each year. Nothing to do with testicular now. Yeah, it's just all a broad brush of cancer. We help all types of cancer organizations.
Yeah, that's fantastic. And is there any criteria for them to qualify to get funds allocated from you, or you just accept any application that comes in for funding?
Yeah. So what typically how I generate the money, we raise around $300,000 a year, and
That's
it's just
huge.
my wife and I doing this. It's just my wife and I,
Just the two of you.
just the two of us. So
Wow.
we raise $300 to $325,000 a year. 200,000 of that is corporate cash, meaning Google and Equinix and all types of different corporate sponsors come in and they bring foursomes
Okay.
of golf for $5,000 or $10,000. They come in and they play in our event, and then they get our benefits of sponsorship, etc. So a bulk of the funds is through corporate cash that we raise the money.
And when you say golf tournament, of course, it is a unique sport, right? So, do you have any celebrities coming in, or do you think of exotic locations? Where do you have this tournament?
We are in Northern California, near San Francisco, and we're in a town called Danville, California. And there's a country club that we host. We have hosted the event at the last 12 years right here in Danville.
So, and that's the place that everybody knows, and they come for the tournament. Is it an annual one, or is it twice a year?
So we have so a normal golf tournament is 144 people.
Okay.
Okay, we host 600.
Wow. Wow. And is
So
there a queue waiting to get entry, or is it anybody can apply and enter?
anybody can apply. Yes.
Oh,
So
okay.
what we've done, we are told that we are the only people in the world that do this. We have 150 people in the morning go out on a Monday in July. So we have 150 people go out in the morning, and then we have another 150 people go out in the afternoon. So we have 2 golf tournaments in one day. And then we do it again 6 weeks later in September. We have another 150 people in the morning and another 150 people in the afternoon to make 600 people. So we
That sounds
basically were so technically we have
crazy.
four golf tournaments that we do over a 2-day span. We have 300 people in July and then 300 people in September.
And how do you manage the logistics? Because you say you're just the two of you.
It's a lot.
Excellent. So your team is just you and Kim, your wife,
Obviously, we have a team of volunteers who have helped us for many, many years. We have a core group of about 15 people who are,
helping out.
yeah, and they are instrumental in our success. One of the things that we've done since day one, when we called it "Have a Ball," we thought, well, we got to make this thing fun, right?
Yes,
So
very important.
from year one, we had people out on the holes. It's an 18-hole golf course, right? So we used to have, the first couple of years we had a couple of restaurants come out, and they would be doing, they'd be making cocktails, and they'd be handing out food. Well, that has grown with the event. That has grown as well. So last year, on an 18-hole golf course, I had 54 hole vendors on an 18-hole golf course. So that
Wow.
means
So
that
everybody's
means I had two or
vying.
three two or three different hole vendors on every single hole.
Fantastic. That's amazing.
And to answer your question earlier, you said celebrities. We don't have worldwide celebrities, no. But what we do bring in is we'll bring in local TV and radio personalities, people that everybody around us knows.
No, yes,
So, a gentleman named Vernon Glenn, he's been a television sports anchor here in the Bay Area for the last 40 years. Many, many people know Vern, and Vern hosts a whole. And we'll have, so we are close to the San Francisco Giants baseball team, and we'll
okay,
get baseball. We have had Sean Estes and Rich Aurelia and many, many players from the baseball team have hosted a hole at our events. We'll have radio disc jockeys come out and host a hole. We have restaurants. We have cocktails. We have a live band on the hole.
oh, that sounds like a lot of fun.
Yeah. So on one hole, we have Miller Coors. We'll have the San Francisco Giants. We have food, and we have a live band on one hole.
What more? What more could anybody ask for? It's amazing. That's really, really
So
commendable.
we've made it a fun event, and but yeah, I wanted to answer your question about just local folk, local celebrities
Yes.
is
Yes,
usually
celebrities,
about
no less. Yes,
yeah,
absolutely.
but
Yes.
celebrities nonetheless, but people that we know around this area.
Fantastic. Do you have any lessons that you've learned in these 20 years? Is there a memorable moment that comes to mind?
Say that one more time. I had a cat yelling in my ear.
In these 20 years, have you learned any lessons, or is there a memorable incident that you remember?
The valuable lessons are you got to take it as it comes because my wife and I never thought that we would be hosting 600 people in a golf tournament, right?
Very true.
So we've learned to adapt, and we've learned to
Adaptability.
you have to learn how to grow and adapt. Um,
Yes.
and I've learned many valuable lessons running a nonprofit now about that obligation of the cure that I spoke of, and what it means during COVID. Is a great example is during COVID.
Mhm.
You know, my wife Kim and I started sending these random checks to organizations. So, and we've become friends with these organizations. A great example is it's a small nonprofit here in Northern California. It's called Campo Kaizu, and
Okay.
Campo Kaizu takes children with cancer and they send them to camp,
Oh,
and
how
they give
nice.
these kids 7 to 10 days of not having to worry about chemotherapy or not having to worry about being sick. They just get to hang out with other kids with cancer and play. And they also have these oncology camps for parents. So the parents also go to these camps and they get to go talk with other parents of dealing with their children with cancer. It's a wonderful organization. My wife and I, one of our first checks that we wrote to an organization that we didn't know was Campo Kaiser. We had seen them on TV we were watching a Giants game and they were talking about Campo Kaiser and I didn't know anything about it. So I learned about them and I sent them a check. That turned into a relationship that we have blossomed over the years through the two foundations. And during COVID, when everything shut down around the world, these small nonprofits who didn't know us 10 years earlier we were getting personal phone calls from the founders of these nonprofits saying, my God, Bob, I hope you and Kim are still doing it this year because we are not getting any money anywhere
Yeah.
else. So that year during COVID, the golf tournament, the golf club, the course that I told you about, that country club, they shut down because they were a chain of organizations around the country. So
Oh,
they shut
okay.
they shut their they shut their services down. I had to find a new golf course, and I held it at a different golf course and still hosted 600 people and still raised 290,000 instead of 300, but we still did it. and we still sent the money along. And it was absolutely massive that we did it that year, because we were able to help so many of these people that the government funding, the local grants, the state help, for the most part, it was stopped. And the fact that Kim and I were able to still get that done through that year, that was probably, and going back to adapting and learning and trying to, and that's kind of, that's the same thing. Somebody gave me an interview one time, and they said, well, that's kind of like, that seems like it's your personality or the personality of somebody who has gone through chemotherapy. And what he meant by that was, you know how to fight.
Fighter, yes.
And you know how to adapt and survive. And I never really thought about it that way, but when he said it, I was like, that's actually a good motto for all cancer survivors who have gone through a significant bout of chemo. And it's not just cancer, it's anybody who's dealt with an illness and has grown and adapted and fought and survived. It's just kind of what you do, and it's kind of in your DNA now, right? And that was just kind of my whole premise of wanting to help others. Was the whole idea was going back to that one phrase, the obligation of the cured, and the fact that we've been able to help all of these tens of thousands of people has just been wonderful, and we're happy to do it, and we're proud to do it.
You are a fighter, you have gone through so much, and despite all that, you've come out with these ideas of helping others. It's not something that an ordinary person can do. So you definitely are extraordinary.
Well, and
Lastly,
I can respond to that really quickly though, and it's going back to when I was a child, and watching my mom die of cancer, and losing her on, like I said, losing a mom on Christmas Day as a
Christmas is
9-year-old.
the worst. Yeah, it's a nightmare.
It never leaves you when your mom dies on Christmas Day when you're 9. And I was watching a TV show with my children, and my kids were probably, I'd say my daughter was about 9 or 10, old enough to understand, a little bit about life, and my son was 7. And we were watching a TV show called Hannah Montana with Miley Cyrus,
Yes.
and yep. And Hannah Montana's mom, it was Christmas time, and Hannah Montana's mom was there, and she was dying or something like that, or somebody died. And I just, for the one time, I never really show a lot of emotion. I'm not an emotional person per se, and I was crying. And my daughter saw me crying, and we turned the TV off, and I was trying to explain to my children that, well, not everybody, sometimes there's things that happen on Christmas. Well, my mom died on Christmas, and my daughter, who was old enough to get it, was like, wow, that's not good. That's a lot, right? Or whatever she said, but yeah, it changes. So the answer is, it changes you when you're like that, and when you go through that as a young child, it can take you a couple of ways, and I just chose to not let it. I knew that it was going to be a lot. And I knew that I was going to be dealing with some emotional stuff, and I just said to myself, I'm not going to let that affect who I am. And when I grew up, and then I got my own cancer, and that's when I was trying to find a way to give back and help others. Is something I learned from my uncle. Actually, my Uncle Bill was a gentleman who he was a single man his entire life. Never even went on a date. He was an old fisherman, and he had his same 1957 Chevrolet truck for the 50 years that he drove it. He was a simple man, but he was always about helping others. And I watched that as a young person growing up. And when you're around somebody like that who was always about just literally giving the shirt off of his back to others to help them, it stays with you. And one of the things that I was thinking about when I was going through the chemo was, what would my Uncle Bill be doing right now? And I responded to myself with, well, he would find a way to turn this around and help other people. And that's what I tried to do.
Absolutely. What a fantastic story. Bob, I want to extend my deepest gratitude for joining us on the podcast today. Your story of cancer survival is nothing short of inspiring. And the journey that you've taken to not only overcome personal adversity, but also to give back through your golf nonprofit, it's really remarkable. Thank you very much. Thank you for sharing your
Well,
experiences. And thank you for all that you are doing to make a difference in the lives of others.
thank you. Thank you for having me today.